Have you ever wondered why no matter how much money you spend on your camera and accessories, your shots just don't look good? Well, today we're going to talk about that. My name is David. I'm a team leader at Persona Media Company, and I want to talk to you today about lighting. Now, we're out in my garage because it's a really interesting place to talk about this. Areas with great lighting, like the one I'm in right now, and we have areas with very poor lighting as well. And so we're going to talk about what the things are that we're looking for in lighting and why it's so important. So right now, my lighting is pretty good, and I'll show you why. Picking up this camera, I'm going to give you a shot of the ceiling. And just notice that we have LED lights all over the place. In fact, there are 12 of them right over my head. So, good overhead lighting can help, but it can also sometimes be a problem. So the next thing we're going to do is turn that lighting off and see what it looks like. So that was good lighting, and this is about as bad as I can get without really trying. I've got all the lights turned off, but there is a window right there. And so it's illuminating the room, and it's providing kind of a dramatic look where you see shadows and you see light. The camera is compensating for the low light a little bit, but watch what happens if I turn on just one light at the right angle. So here's one light pretty much right behind the camera, directly in front of me. Now, when most people get a ring light or some other accessory light, this is where they put it. But that's not what they do in Hollywood. Let me show you an effect called key lighting. And there we go. So just to my left, we have what we're calling a key light. And it's the primary light that we're using to light the subject, which in this case is going to be you, but it's generally complemented by one or two other lights. So the next one that we're going to look at is going to go on the other side to complement that. So now to my right, we've added what's called in the film industry a fill light. And what it's doing is filling out some of the shadows on this side of my face. It's not nearly as bright as my key light, but it does help to add some detail and not make it look so overly dramatic, if you know what I mean. But we're still missing something. So the third light we're going to talk about is called a backlight or a hair light. And what it's doing is creating separation between me and my background to give it more of a 3D effect. That's actually pretty important because if we're just up against a wall, it can look like a mugshot. Let me show you what that looks like. Does this look familiar? I see this much more often than I'd like to admit, and it's normal. Most of us have small offices, especially when we're working from home, and so there's no choice but to put a wall right back behind us. But if there's any way to avoid that, it is often preferable, even if the background isn't quite as nice. Let me show you that. So here's me in front of a dirty garage door, but in this case, I have 6 or 7 feet behind me, and it really makes all the difference. So which do you like better, this or the previous shot against the wall? Personally, I think up against the wall makes me look like I'm having my picture taken in a lineup for a mug shot, but to each his own. Okay, finally, let's go back to this. Now this looks pretty good. I've got my key light, my fill light, I've got my hair light, and I've got my overhead lighting. So nothing to complain about, except I can't really do much with it. Unless, okay, so what changed? I turned off the overhead lights because I can't change the color temperature of those, and I set my other lights to a warmer setting. Now again, I can't do anything with that backlight, but all it's doing is separating me from the background. That could be a purple or a red or a green or anything. It doesn't matter. It's the color of the lights in front of me that really count, and I've set them to a pretty warm setting. So let's play around and see if we can find some place in the middle that really works well. And while it has a lot to do with personal preference, this is about how I like it. But now let me show you something else. I'm going to turn on the overhead lights, and then I'm going to set my key light and my fill light to their warmest setting, but where they're different from the temperature of the overhead lights, which is actually very cold. So this is another thing that I see a lot. We'll have a light that's very cold, whether it's overhead lights or the sun. In fact, the sun, believe it or not, is a very cold light setting, and your warm fire light, it's very different. So Well, we've got one source that we can't change. In this case, it's the overhead lights, but maybe it's a window for you. And I've tried to warm it up with my other lighting. For me, it just doesn't work. It just looks a little bit weird and off. Whereas if I make the lights match, I think it's much better. So let's say that we have a, shall we say, suboptimal lighting condition. Right now I've got this big window back behind me and I've got a fluorescent over my head, and that's just about it. Now my camera is trying to compensate for that, figure out where I am and what it needs to light up, just like yours will. But watch what happens if I just step to the side. Okay, now it looked like I turned the lights off. I didn't do anything. That was just the camera adjusting, and this is not a top-of-the-line camera. Yours will do this too, especially if you have auto ISO adjust, auto lighting, something like that enabled, which in most cases you probably should, but it's worth checking just to, oh my gosh, I'm totally even out of focus now. That's better. Yeah, so you should generally as a default have those things on, but it's worth sometimes going to manual just to see if it makes it better, especially if you've dialed in your lighting just right. And this is what it looks like when we have what we thought of as bad lighting, but we added one light directly behind the camera. That may be a ring light, it may be some other accessory light, it may even be a lamp, but it looks a lot better. There's something else that we can do though to make it even kind of cooler. So now I've moved my light just a little off to the side. It's right there. I'll show you what it looks like if we move it even further to create a more dramatic effect. Now the light is directly off to my side, and you can really see the shadows start to come in. This creates a very dramatic effect, which is cool and may or may not be right for your situation. I just changed one thing. Can you tell what it is? I added a light back behind me. And instead of facing it toward me, this time I aimed it at the wall, which creates even more of a separation between me and my background. Now this is just the wall where we hang our horse tack. It's nothing fancy, but it gives us kind of a cool look in a not very cool environment. And you can see now that even with bad lighting, quote unquote, we can make something really neat by putting lights where we want. So I have one light here, one light back there, and no fill light. Why? Because this is a white wall. And a white wall acts as a reflective surface that can do sort of the same thing. May work for you, may not. But you have to just play around with these things until you find something you like. And before you're convinced that this is just like some fancy camera making this happen, let me switch to my cell phone. Okay guys, this is pretty much the worst camera that I have. Now the phone is a Samsung Galaxy A52, which 2 or 3 years ago was Samsung's budget model that could be bought at the time for about $300 cash, unlocked without any kind of a contract. The thing that's even worse about it is I'm shooting on the front-facing camera. The cameras on the back of your phone are much better, but this is about as bad as it gets, and as you see, it still looks pretty good. Now I've changed just a couple of things only because I have to move this camera forward a lot more than the other one, which had a 50mm lens. So I scooted this light just about a foot in, and I've repositioned myself just a bit within the frame, but looks pretty good. I sure hope that this video has been helpful to you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. In the meantime, just keep shooting video. Right now, I'm here with all the lights turned off, except again, the overhead lights, right where we started. And as you can see, there's no problem. So lighting is really not about necessarily spending money or getting certain products or whatever. It's about fixing problems. But I hope you've seen now that lighting is a powerful tool that can change everything about the way you look on camera.